This is the sharp end of Australia's tough policy to deter asylum seekers, known as Operation Relics. A unit from HMAS Arunta has boarded a boat and is taking it back to Indonesia. The asylum seekers are angry, confused and desperate. One man throws himself into the water. A child is held up. Operation Relics was top secret until the Senate began its inquiry into, quote, a certain maritime incident. Unofficially, it's called the Children Overboard Inquiry.
Shall give before this committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Now Australia's most senior naval commanders and public servants are being grilled. The committee wants to know how Operation Relics works, the chain of command, and where information flows. Rear Admiral Geoffrey Smith is Australia's maritime commander.
Just in terms of, again, the range of your command with Operation Relics, does that includes the all of the vessels patrolling the regions? Does that include the Orion aircraft as well as the Navy vessels?
Yes, it does, Senator.
So you'd be aware of what their movements are and what they see, and they'd be providing reports to you as well?
That's correct. There were RAAF P3s and there were also Coast Watch aircraft which were working to us for this operation.
Operation Relics has thrown a surveillance and naval interception net over the northwest approaches to Australia that extends almost to Indonesia.
You must look at this operation in all dimensions. The surveillance, the air surveillance, was being conducted up near the Indonesian archipelago, as close as 30 odd miles, and south from there. The ships, however, were positioned where we felt them best positioned to maximise our chances of interception.
Australia also gathers intelligence in Indonesia's ports and along the coastline. And it's not just a military operation. Above all this sits the government's People Smuggling Task Force. It feeds information and operational advice to the highest levels, including the Prime Minister's office. Operation Relics has so far intercepted 12 suspected illegal entry vessels, known by their acronym as Civics. But on May the 1st, the inquiry dealt with a vessel known as Civics that sank, killing 353 people.
I greatly admire the professionalism, camaraderie and integrity of the Navy and of the Australian Defence Force as a whole.
Tony Kevin, former Australian ambassador to Cambodia, appeared before the inquiry and made some disturbing assertions.
Something went seriously wrong in the information chain in Australia's border protection system during October 2001 that had terrible human life consequences.
Kevin reminded the inquiry that Civics had been grossly overloaded, with people forced to board under duress. After sailing for about a day and a half, it sank on October the 19th last year. There were only 44 survivors. One was Sundous Ismael. She lost her 3 young children and her sister. Her picture was flashed around Australia and around the world. Her grief put a human face to the plight of the asylum seekers. She'll never forget the moment the boat sank.
بعدين بعد دخلت لنا موجة كبيرة من جهة واحدة وغرقتنا، يعني بحيث الأطفال والنساء والرجال كلهم، يعني الرجال اللي كانوا واقفين من هاي جاء على مود شوية هاي تستعدل يعني الوضعية مالت الباخرة، الرجال اللي كانوا واقفين منا بعد كلهم رأسا صاروا بالبحر وقعوا، والأطفال يعني كلها ظلت تزلق هيك وتوقع بالبحر.
It was by far the largest loss of life in people smuggling operations to Australia.
It doesn't have to be a conspiracy.
Tony Kevin's highly controversial view is that Australia must have known about the vessel and should have done something.
There were many ways in which Australia might have acted to prevent the loss of 353 lives, if that information had come to Canberra in time and if it had been properly handled in Canberra at the time it sank.
Shocked by the magnitude of the tragedy, Kevin began to investigate what had happened. After careful calculations based on media reports and information given in the Senate inquiry, he concluded the boat went down in international waters and not in the vicinity of Indonesia's Sundous Strait, as claimed by the Australian government. Where the boat sank is crucial. All vessels must respond to a safety of life at sea emergency known as SOLAS. That includes the powerful Navy frigates of Operation Relics if they receive information of a SOLAS emergency.
So I've shown you the first map just showing the area of Operation Relics. You've got Christmas Island here and Ashmore Reef over here, and you've got the 30-mile off Java up here, running along there.
Kevin has also used information contained in this letter from Defence Minister Robert Hill to Opposition Leader Simon Crean. It states the government view that the vessel was in the vicinity of the Sundous Strait when it sank on October 19. The letter also says that the frigate HMAS Arunta was at no time closer than 150 nautical miles from the Sundous Strait, where it is believed the refugee vessel sank.
They were in the water for 22 hours and they were dying gradually in the water as people lost the will to live and dropped off their planks. And Arunta could have been there in 4 hours. So even if Australia had, for example, only become aware of the sinking as the sinking happened, for example, through satellite imagery or through some kind of aerial surveillance, there would have still been time to do something had there been the will to do something.
Dateline has obtained a set of coordinates from the harbour master here at Sunda Kelapa port in North Jakarta. The coordinates are from this document detailing the rescue by Indonesian fishing boats and show the point where the survivors were picked up. The position is very similar to Tony Kevin's calculations of where the boat went down. Expert advice provided to Dateline say the coordinates are 51.5 nautical miles from the Indonesian coastline. If the coordinates are correct, then the vessel sank in international waters well beyond the Sundous Strait and within the surveillance area of Operation Relics.
If it went down out in the Indian Ocean, more than 12 miles away from Indonesia, and particularly if it went down at 30 miles from Indonesia, which is the outer limit of Australia's air surveillance under Operation Relics, Australia's regular air surveillance, well, that makes it a safety of life at sea emergency completely in international waters and requiring an emergency response from the nearest available countries' resources that can do something about it.
Presumably HMAS Arunta.
Yes.
I think you're saying to us that your thesis is, given the intensity of this issue in terms of its prominence, in terms of government policy, its and the sensitive time and the priority that Operation Relics has, with the resources applied to Relics, it's not likely that any of these vessels wouldn't have been closely tracked. Is that what you're saying to us?
Yes.
Without going into all the detail of it,
Yes.
you're making that assumption.
Not really an assumption, Senator. It's based on my careful reading of evidence in this committee by expert witnesses.
So who knew what about the ill-fated Civics? When did they know it? And where did that information go? That's precisely what the Senate inquiry has been trying to find out. Defence Minister Robert Hill's letter to Simon Crean contains more important information, specifically that Coastwatch had in fact advised Australian authorities that a vessel had departed the Sundous Strait on or about the 18th or 19th of October 2001, bound for Christmas Island, and was overdue. But the Australian Maritime Safety Authority told the Senate inquiry they only received the message on the 22nd of October.
AMSA's records show that it had no prior knowledge about the departure of this vessel. The first advice on our records was by Coastwatch on the 22nd of October last year.
By then the boat was more than overdue. It had sunk 3 days earlier, on the 19th. The Maritime Safety Authority even sent a fax to their Indonesian counterpart, Basarnas, noting the vessel was late. But had the ill-fated boat still been afloat, there was no way that Basarnas could have responded. They have no record of the fax.
Jadi saya juga kalau melihat semua data-data saya, semua logbook saya, agenda-agenda oleh staf saya sudah tidak ada gitu. Dan semua, saya ulang kembali, apabila ada berita, baik berita dari manapun asal masuk stasiun kita, stasiun fax email, dicatat dari mana, dari mana baru diedarkan gitu.
AMSA says it was sent, but incredibly weren't concerned enough to check it had arrived.
We do ring them from time to time and have discussions to ensure that they're aware of the situation, but in a case like this, I think our records show there wasn't any phone contact.
And what of the high-priority Operation Relics, with all its naval intelligence gathering capabilities, its aircraft surveillance and Navy frigates? They too apparently knew nothing.
First of all, I must say I can't pass up the opportunity to get this on record. I took great offence on behalf of the Navy at that suggestion that a professional organisation such as our Navy would even allow or ignore a circumstance such as that if we were in a position to be able to assist. And indeed, the first time that the Navy knew that this vessel had sailed was in fact we were advised through the search and rescue organisation in Canberra that this vessel may have foundered in the vicinity of Sundous Strait. At that time our nearest ship was about 150 miles away.
It's all back to front. I mean, the idea that the Navy sits and knows nothing until Coastwatch and the Maritime Safety Authority tell it about an asylum seeker boat that's gone missing on the way to Australia, when the Navy is precisely in the business of tracking and intercepting asylum seeker boats on the way to Australia, is incredible.
Incredible or not, it's one of a series of unexplained events in this tragic tale. Why, for example, were 400 people crammed under duress onto a leaky boat that, even were it seaworthy, could carry no more than 150 people in safety? Sundous Ismael went into the water at about 3 p.m. on Friday afternoon on the 19th of October, but when it grew dark, she thought she'd be rescued. She and other survivors tell of 2 large boats that shone bright lights on them. According to Sundous, the boats stayed for what seemed like hours.
يعني كانت الناس هم تسوي هاي الصفارات مالت النجادة، هم كانت يعني الصوفر كلياتها يعني الناس تصوفر بصفارة النجادة. ما أدري بعد ما كانوا يعني يسمعونها، يعني ما كنا نتوقع إنه مثل ما يسمعونها، يعني نشوفها يعني كأنها قريبة جدا لنا.
By morning, the mysterious vessels were gone, without rescuing a single asylum seeker. As we've heard, the Australian Navy say they had no boats in the area. Sundous was rescued by an Indonesian fishing boat around 8 a.m. the next day. She'd spent about 18 hours in the water. Some survivors spent even longer. Remember, HMAS Arunta was only about 5 hours away.
We made some assessments on windows where these vessels might appear.
Tony Kevin is now very publicly putting the view that information about the boat was in the system, but nothing was done about it.
I read into that the possibility of a decision having been taken in Canberra, somewhere in Canberra, that this boat was probably not going to get to Christmas Island anyway, so it wasn't necessary for the Navy or Operation Relics to be told about it. That basically the problem of this boat would solve itself.
Now that's a very strong statement.
Yes.
You see no other interpretation could be drawn from this series of events? Perhaps there may be any number of other possibilities occurred.
There isn't any other number. There's the possibility of a bureaucratic stuff-up. There's the possibility that somebody lost the report. I frankly find that hard to countenance.
Today there were dramatic developments in the Senate inquiry contradicting previous testimony by Maritime Commander Rear Admiral Smith. The head of Coast Watch testified that it had provided information to military intelligence about a vessel being prepared by people smuggler Abu Kesai as early as August last year. It was the ill-fated Civics.
Coast Watch originally received information as early as August 2001 that Abu Kesai was allegedly in the process of arranging a boat departure of illegal immigrants, probably to Christmas Island.
An intelligence report provided the day after the vessel left port even included this chillingly accurate assessment.
The information included advice that the vessel was reportedly small and overcrowded. The full detail of the advice is classified.
And there were more revelations. A letter from Maritime Commander Rear Admiral Smith was tabled, titled Clarification of Evidence. It contradicted his earlier testimony to the committee, given under oath, and confirmed the Coast Watch evidence that the Navy knew about Civics well before it sank on the 19th of October. The letter details intelligence received by the Navy in relation to Civics on no less than 5 occasions, including prior to its departure. But Smith terms much of the intelligence inconclusive and writes that no specific confirmation of departure was ever received. Be it confusion, conspiracy or cover-up, it looks increasingly like Tony Kevin's concerns are well-founded.